The slap echoed louder than the fireworks. I felt her ring cut across my cheek, the same sapphire that once belonged to our mother. I touched my face, slowly. Not in pain. Just to mark the moment. Get out of here, you venomous bitch. He chose me, not you. I know you two had your little fling. You're just trying to ruin my wedding. 72 people watched her unravel. What they didn't know. I was the one who put the photo in that slideshow. The one where Mom wore my ring.my name. Is Trissy. I'm 32. And that slap? Was the sound of a trap closing. The memory lives in that space between sleep and waking, where truth feels both distant and immediate. Mom and I were in the kitchen, washing dishes after another family dinner where I'd somehow become invisible again. The summer heat made the old house feel like a sauna, but Mom insisted on washing everything by hand, her movements careful and deliberate around the old china that had survived 3 generations. This ring, she said quietly, twisting the sapphire on her finger, the gem catching the light from the window where fireflies had started their nightly dance. It was your grandmother's. And someday, it'll be yours. I remember pausing mid-rinse, soap bubbles clinging to my fingers like tiny promises. The dishwater had gone lukewarm, and I could hear Dad's television blaring from the living room, but in that moment, the kitchen felt sacred. Really, really. Just between us two. She smiled, that secret smile mothers reserve for their daughters. The one that says you're chosen, you're special, you matter. Your grandmother always said it should go to someone who understands the weight of family memories. Someone who values what came before. I felt chosen. Finally chosen for something. The ring seemed to pulse with its own light, as if it knew it was being promised to its next keeper, but Mom got sick that fall. The cancer came fast and merciless, stealing her voice before it stole her breath. During those final weeks, when the house smelled like medicine and false hope, I never found the courage to ask about the ring. It felt too small, too selfish, too much like planning for a world without her. After the funeral, the ring simply vanished. No one mentioned it. No one asked about it. The silence around Mom's jewelry became another thing I learned to swallow, another disappointment I filed away in the growing collection of things I'd never voice. Dad cleaned out her dresser with mechanical efficiency, sorting through a lifetime of accumulated treasures like they were items for a yard sale. But 3 years later, when Ashley waltzed into Dad's house with her hand extended, showing off her reformed antique engagement ring during another sweltering summer evening, I felt something cold settle in my chest despite the heat. That sapphire caught the porch light the same way it had on Mom's finger. The same way it had in my dreams. Darren had it specially made, she gushed, not meeting my eyes, her voice carrying that particular smugness that came with being the preferred daughter. He said something about it being meant for someone who really shines. Someone who deserves beautiful things. I watched her twirl it, watched the family oh and ah over how perfect it looked on her finger. The cousins crowded around her, aunts complimented her taste, and Dad actually teared up with pride. And I said nothing. Because what could I say? That I remembered a promise whispered over dirty dishes? That I'd recognized something stolen? That my chest felt hollow watching something that belonged to me sparkle on someone else's hand. The absence of proof felt heavier than the ring itself. Darren wasn't new to our family. He'd tried his charm on me 2 years before Ashley came into the picture, back when I was still foolish enough to believe in second chances and good intentions. Back when I thought maybe someone could see past the family's narrative about me being the difficult one, the one who never quite fit. Got this sensible thing going, he'd said over coffee at that little place downtown, his smile too practiced. Too smooth, like he'd tested it in mirrors. I could use a partner like you in this business venture. Someone who really gets people, you know? Someone with your insight. The business venture turned out to be a pyramid scheme wrapped in motivational speaking, complete with weekend seminars and promises of financial freedom. When I declined politely, because I'd been raised to be polite even when every instinct screamed danger, he disappeared faster than morning mist. No goodbye, no explanation, no acknowledgement that we'd ever spoken. Just gone. His sudden absence felt like confirmation of everything I'd suspected about myself. I wasn't interesting enough to hold anyone's attention. I wasn't valuable enough to pursue. I was the backup plan, the safety net, the one you called when better options fell through. Now here he was, perfectly positioned as Ashley's perfect fiancé, wearing the same smile that had once tried to convince me I was special. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so predictable. Of course he'd found his way to Ashley. Of course he'd chosen the sister who sparkled, who drew attention, who made men feel important just by existing. At Dad's birthday party that summer, Ashley made her grand announcement. The whole family gathered in the backyard, paper plates and plastic cups scattered across picnic tables, kids running between the adults' legs while classic rock played from Dad's old boombox. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of citronella candles fighting a losing battle against mosquitoes. When she held up her hand, letting that stolen sapphire catch the string lights Dad had hung between the trees, the entire gathering fell silent. Then erupted in congratulations. Finally, Dad said, pulling Ashley into a hug that lasted too long, his voice thick with emotion. Finally, one of my daughters knows how to choose happiness. Knows how to be chosen. The words hit exactly where they were meant to land. I felt the familiar sting of being compared, measured, found wanting. But something else stirred beneath the hurt, a cold, calculating anger that I barely recognized. It felt dangerous and foreign, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit, but somehow looked better than anything I'd ever owned. Darren caught my eye over Ashley's shoulder and winked. Actually winked. Like we were sharing some private joke about how well his plan was working. Like I was in on the scheme instead of its victim. Excused myself to help clear plates, my hands shaking as I stacked disposable dinnerware. In the kitchen, I started making lists in my head. Not of evidence, not yet. Just of patterns, inconsistencies, things that didn't quite fit together. The way Darren always seemed to know exactly what to say to make people feel special. The way Ashley's spending had increased dramatically since they'd started dating. The way Dad's accounts had been reorganized, with Ashley suddenly having access to funds that had been locked away since Mom's death. The ring was just the beginning. Asterisk, you're not seriously going to start with that ring story again, are you, my brother? Jake's voice carried across the living room where we'd gathered to plan the 4th of July menu. The air conditioning wheezed against the late June heat, and Ashley sat curled in Dad's favorite chair, scrolling through wedding Pinterest boards on her phone while I sorted through old family recipes for potato salad and coleslaw. Every time Ashley's happy, you find something to complain about, Jake continued, not bothering to lower his voice, his beer bottle sweating condensation onto the coffee table. It's getting old, Trissy. Really old. I hadn't said anything about the ring. Not one word. But apparently, my silence had been loud enough. Apparently, the way I'd gone quiet when she'd shown it off again had been evidence enough of my jealousy. Just jealous, Ashley said without looking up from her phone, her voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty that came wrapped in casual observation. Some people can't handle watching other people succeed. Some people would rather tear others down than build themselves up. The words hit like physical blows. I felt my face burn with shame and anger, the familiar cocktail of emotions that came with being the family scapegoat. But underneath the hurt, something else was building, a cold, patient rage that felt almost clinical in its precision. Dad nodded from his spot on the couch, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he pretended to focus on the newspaper. Your sister's finally found someone who appreciates her. Maybe you should take notes instead of trying to steal her spotlight, the patriarch had spoken. The family nodded in agreement, accepting the verdict without question. I was the problem. I was the one who couldn't celebrate others' happiness. I was the bitter sister who resented Ashley's success in love. At least Ashley knows how to be loved. Dad continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd learned to hate. At least she doesn't drive good men away with negativity. My blood turned to fire in my veins. Every cell in my body screamed for me to defend myself, to explain, to demand they listen. But I knew better. Without proof, every word I spoke would be twisted into evidence of my jealousy, my bitterness, my inability to celebrate my sister's happiness. So I smiled. Thin and brittle, but still a smile. The kind of smile that could cut glass if you knew how to look at it. You're right, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Family should support family. Jake looked satisfied, taking another swig of his beer. Ashley smirked, still scrolling through wedding dresses. Dad went back to his newspaper, the matter settled to his satisfaction. But my cousin Janine caught my eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. She knew. She'd always known how they treated me. She'd grown up watching the family dynamics, seeing how I'd been cast as the difficult one, the one who never quite measured up. And for the first time, I realized I wouldn't have to carry the weight of the truth alone. The heat outside pressed against the windows, but inside, I felt something cold and patient settling into my bones. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd put me in my place once again. They had no idea what they'd just started. Aunt Flora's house smelled like lavender and old memories, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat that had settled over the city like a wool blanket. I'd volunteered to help her clean out Grandma's bedroom, partly to be useful, mostly to escape the wedding planning conversations that had taken over every family gathering since Ashley's engagement. The afternoon sun streamed through lace curtains, casting intricate shadows across decades of accumulated life. Flora moved slowly through the room, her arthritis making her careful with each box, each treasure. She kept everything, Flora said, pulling down boxes from the closet with the reverence of someone handling sacred objects. Pictures, letters, report cards from when you kids were little. She said memories were the only inheritance that mattered, the only thing that couldn't be stolen or lost. I worked methodically through the boxes, sorting photos by decade, setting aside the ones that might mean something to someone. The pictures told the story of our family in fragments, birthday parties, graduations, holidays, all the moments that seemed important enough to preserve. I found myself lingering over images of Mom, her smile bright and genuine, her hand often resting on someone's shoulder in that protective way she'd had. When I found it, a graduation photo from Flora's college ceremony, 30 years old. And slightly faded around the edges, but clear enough to stop my heart. Mom stood behind Grandma, her hand resting on our grandmother's shoulder. Both women were smiling, proud and happy, and completely unaware they were documenting something that would matter decades later. The photo had been taken in bright sunlight, probably during one of those perfect spring days when everything feels possible, but it was the ring that made my breath catch. That sapphire caught the camera flash like a small piece of captured sky. Sitting exactly where it had always belonged, on Mom's finger, where she'd worn it with such quiet pride. The stone was unmistakable, the setting identical, the way it caught the light exactly as I remembered from countless family dinners. "Oh my God," Flora whispered when she saw what I was holding, her hand flying to her chest. "I remember this day. Your mom was so careful with that ring. She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever inherited, the most responsibility she'd ever accepted." My hands shook as I held the photo up to the light, studying every detail. Clear, undeniable, impossible to explain away. The evidence I'd been searching for without even knowing I was searching. "She told me it would be yours someday," Flora continued, her voice dropping to a whisper as if we were sharing state secrets. "Just you two talking about it, nobody else around. She said you were the one who understood family history, who would treasure it the way it deserved to be treasured." The validation hit me like a physical force. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the jealous sister making up stories to hurt Ashley's happiness. I was the rightful heir to something that had been stolen, something that had been given to someone who had no claim to it. I scanned the photo that night, saved it in 3 different places, and called the lawyer I'd been consulting in secret. The same lawyer who'd been quietly investigating Darren's business dealings and Ashley's suspicious access to Dad's accounts. The same lawyer who'd been building a case I didn't even know I needed. For the first time in years, I had something more powerful than silence. I had proof. And I had a plan. 72 people. I'd counted them as they filed into Dad's backyard for our annual 4th of July barbecue, carrying covered dishes and family grudges in equal measure. The picnic tables groaned under the weight of tradition: potato salad, coleslaw, baked beans, and corn on the cob, all arranged on red checkered tablecloths that fluttered in the humid breeze. The air was thick with the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid, citronella candles fighting a losing battle against mosquitoes, and that particular scent of summer that comes from too many people gathered in too small a space. Kids ran between the adults' legs, sparklers waiting in boxes for when darkness fell, and somewhere in the distance, early fireworks popped like champagne corks. Been quiet all evening, watching Ashley work the room like she was campaigning for something. The ring caught every light, every glance, every compliment about how radiant she looked. She'd chosen a white sundress that made her look like a summer bride, and she knew it. Darren stayed close, his hand possessive on her waist, playing the part of the devoted fiancé with Oscar-worthy commitment. "Let's look at some family photos," Dad announced after the main course, wrestling with the old projector he'd set up near the house. "Since we're all together, and it's such a perfect night," I felt the familiar weight of being part of a family where I was simultaneously essential and invisible. Essential for organizing, cleaning, managing. Invisible for everything else. But tonight, I had a different role to play. I put together a slideshow, I said quietly, my voice carrying just far enough to reach the people closest to me. All the old family photos. I thought it would be nice. The photos started innocent enough. Baby pictures, birthday parties, graduations. The family oohed and awed at appropriate moments, telling stories everyone had heard a dozen times before. The projector hummed against the evening sounds, casting warm light against the side of the house. Then my photo appeared on the screen. Mom's graduation picture, crystal clear and blown up to fill the entire makeshift screen. Her hand on Grandma's shoulder, both of them glowing with pride and hope. And there, impossible to miss, undeniable and perfect, the sapphire ring catching the light like evidence of theft. The ring filled the frame, obviously zoomed in, obviously highlighted. I'd made sure of that. The backyard went silent. Not the comfortable quiet of shared memories, but the sharp, dangerous silence of a truth finally exposed. Even the kids seemed to sense something had changed, their chatter dying away. As they looked between the adults' suddenly tense faces, "Wait," someone whispered. Is that the same ring?" Cousin Mark asked, his voice cutting through the quiet. I watched faces turn toward Ashley, then toward the screen, then back to Ashley. The comparison was unavoidable. The evidence was undeniable. Whispers started rippling through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "It's Mom's ring," Jake said slowly, his beer frozen halfway to his lips. From when she was young. Ashley's face went through 3 distinct color changes. Pale, red, purple with rage. She knew. We all knew. The game was over, and she was losing. "Turn it off," she screamed, jumping from her chair so fast it toppled backward. "Stop it. You're just jealous. I can't help that he chose me over you. I know you two had your little insignificant fling, and now you want to ruin my wedding." The words hung in the air like smoke from the grill, poisonous and impossible to clear. But she wasn't done. The audience was still watching, still processing. Still putting pieces together. She desperately needed them to ignore. "You want to ruin my happiness because you couldn't keep him," she continued, her voice rising to a shriek. "He chose me, not you. You always find a way to take the spotlight when it's not yours. Get out of here, you venomous bitch. You're not welcome here." The slap came fast and hard, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent backyard like a gunshot. 72 pairs of eyes watched as my head snapped to the side, as Ashley's hand left its mark on my cheek, as the summer air itself seemed to hold its breath. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even touch my face, because I'd been waiting for this moment. Because I'd orchestrated this moment. Because everything was going exactly according to plan. Trissy started it, Ashley announced to the gathering, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. She's been trying to sabotage my relationship from the beginning. She can't stand that Darren chose me instead of her. She's been planning this for months. The family murmured agreement, but the murmurs were uncertain. Now, conflicted. Of course they wanted to believe Ashley. Of course they wanted to maintain the narrative where I was the problem, the troublemaker, the one who couldn't let anyone else be happy, but that photo was still glowing on the screen behind us, impossible to ignore, impossible to explain away. I didn't say anything, Ashley, I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the shocked silence. I just showed a family photo. A picture of Mom wearing Grandma's ring. The ring that was supposed to be mine, she knew. In that moment, watching her face crumble, we both knew the game was over. But she'd already given me everything I needed. She'd revealed her true nature in front of 72 witnesses. She'd shown them exactly who she was when cornered. She'd slapped me. In front of everyone. Over a photo of our dead mother, and that was going to be her undoing. While the family spent the next hour awkwardly trying to continue the celebration, dissecting my character in hushed tones and analyzing my motivations over dessert, I sat in my car outside and finally let myself smile. Real fireworks had started. Going off in the distance, the professional ones from the city celebration, but they couldn't compete with the fireworks I'd just set off in my own backyard. The photo had been perfect. The reaction had been exactly what I'd expected. But the slap, that had been even better than I'd hoped. That had been Ashley showing everyone exactly who she was when she felt threatened. The lawyer had been busy for weeks while I'd been playing the role of the quiet, dutiful daughter. The photo was just the final piece of evidence in a case that had been building since I'd first noticed the irregularities in Dad's bank accounts. Ashley's additional cards, the mysterious transfers, the down payment on a house that somehow involved Darren's shell company, but it was more than financial fraud. Darren's history read like a cautionary tale about predatory men who targeted vulnerable families. 3 states, 5 different names, a trail of broken engagements and empty bank accounts. The lawyer had found 2 other women who'd been engaged to him, both of whom had lost family heirlooms and life savings before he'd disappeared. He's a professional, the lawyer had explained during our last meeting. He finds families in transition, death, divorce, financial stress, and he targets the daughters. Usually the ones who feel invisible, who are desperate to be chosen. But in your case, he miscalculated. He chose the wrong sister. The ring was documented as part of Mom's informal estate. The photo proved its history. The financial records showed a pattern of manipulation that went far beyond stolen jewelry. And now, thanks to Ashley's public meltdown, I had 72 witnesses to her confession. Point 2. Days later, the bank froze Dad's accounts pending investigation. The house purchase fell through. The wedding venue called asking about overdue payments that were suddenly not being made. Darren disappeared between Tuesday and Wednesday, leaving behind only a forwarded phone number and a note about pursuing opportunities in California. The same note, I learned later, that he'd left for his previous 2 fiancées. Ashley's world crumbled with the quiet efficiency of a controlled demolition. No explosions, no dramatic confrontations. Just the methodical removal of everything she'd built on lies. The wedding dress was returned. The venue deposit was lost. The invitations were never sent. The family that had defended her so passionately at the barbecue began asking uncomfortable questions. About the money. About the timeline. About how a grieving daughter could steal from her own father while wearing her dead mother's ring. About how they'd all been so quick to believe her story, so eager to blame me. By Friday, my phone was buzzing with messages. You didn't know. You should have told us. Ashley's really struggling right now. Maybe we misunderstood. The family needs to stick together. I read every message. I listened to every voicemail. I watched them all try to rebuild bridges they'd burned in front of 72 witnesses. But I didn't respond. Not to a single one. The ring came back to me on a Tuesday morning in late July, when the heat was so oppressive that even the lawyer's office felt like a sanctuary. The building was sterile and efficient, all clean lines and neutral colors, the kind of place where truth was measured in documents and justice was dispensed through paperwork. Ashley wasn't there. She'd signed the papers through her own attorney, avoiding the final humiliation of handing over what had never been hers. The lawyer placed the ring on the desk between us like it was evidence in a trial, which, in a way, it was. I slipped it onto my finger where it belonged, where it had always belonged. The sapphire caught the fluorescent light like a small piece of justice, finally returned to its rightful place. It felt heavier than I remembered, weighted with history and vindication. The messages kept coming. Calls from Dad, texts from Jake. Even a long email from Ashley herself, full of apologies and explanations and requests for forgiveness. The family had finally seen the evidence, understood the scope of the deception, realized they'd defended the wrong person. They wanted to make amends, to rebuild relationships, to pretend that years of dismissal and cruelty could be erased with a few awkward phone calls, but I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I didn't explain or forgive or offer comfort to people who'd spent years teaching me that my voice didn't matter. Janine called once. Just once. I'm proud of you, she said simply. You did what you had to do. You got justice. I didn't do anything, I replied, looking at the ring on my finger, feeling its weight like a promise kept. I just stayed quiet long enough for them to show everyone who they really were. Now I sit in my apartment, air conditioning humming against the summer heat, thinking about the weight of silence. They thought quiet meant weak. They thought invisible meant powerless. They thought I was the one who needed to explain myself, to justify my existence, to earn my place in a family that had never made room for me, but I learned something in those months of gathering evidence, building my case, waiting for the right moment. I learned that silence isn't empty. It's full of choices. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing. They slapped me in front of 72 people, thinking they were putting me in my place. But they were really just showing everyone exactly who they'd always been. I stayed quiet. And this time, they heard it.